Om Namah Shivaya. Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhed Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So as we planned, the first order of business is to give you the texts. So kindly come forward if you have registered for the class. If you're here for the whole week, then please come. And everybody should come. And for those of you that also would benefit from the Hindi version of Swami Maheshananji, please let me know and then we'll get you both of them. If you cannot read Hindi, then at least get Swami Dayananji's book. So please come. They're both. If one of you can just assist me to get it to everybody, and then you can also give it to me. Okay. So very quickly, before we start the class, let's just quickly go over the overall structure of the books, starting with Swami Dayananji's book. So what you will see in let's just turn to page 70 and 71. As an example. It's a very comprehensive book, very, very well written, absolutely marvelous. So what Swamiji has done, with the help of some very good staff people, is to provide the mantras that are blessing this particular ShriRudram mantras itself. So, for example, on the left-hand side, this is what is called Dhyanashloka. So the Dhyanashloka would be that you would ideally, if you are very experienced and committed and loyal, you will actually say the Dhyanashloka. And for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, you know what the Dhyanashloka for Bhagavad Gita is, right? Parthaya pratibodhitam bhagavata, like that. So like that, these are the various dhyana shlokas. So then there is a list of the dhyana shlokas. You can do that later on whenever you have a chance to do so, or if you are interested, you can read that as well. Then followed by the particular mantra here in Anuvaka number 2, it starts with Namo Hiranyabahave Senanye Dishan Chapataye Namo Namo, like that. So there the mantra is given, followed by a word for word translation. Namaha, salutations, Hiranyabahave, the one who has hands shining with golden ornaments, etc. Followed by an English sentence that basically translates the meaning of the mantra into English. Salutations to the Lord who has hands shining, etc. Followed by a commentary by Swami Dayananji in English, which goes up to almost like a full page, ending with the middle of page number 73. So this is the basic content of Swami Dayanandaji's book, and the entire book is covered this way, right up to the very end. So just I think this is really more of a, you should really begin with it. Supposing you are doing this is how you will do that. Now, the concepts we were talking about earlier about Adi Daivika and Adhyatmika should be kept in mind, and as you don't have to worry about that at this point, but at least you should see, and this is something that has to be imbibed over time. You cannot just read it, one page at a time and then say, okay, I'm done with this. It just takes a while. Swami Dhananji used to say this. He says, when you're making gulab jamun, which we had this morning, or rasgulla, his example was usually rasgulla. You first fry the ball and make it into a nice shape and so on. And then you have to dip it into this sugar liquid for it. Now, if you just put it down quickly and then take it out, that doesn't do it. So you have to keep it there for a while until it soaks through. Similarly is really the vidya that we are doing, and that is the shravanam. And so the mananam is where you are digesting. Yeah, that's a good word to use, that the food doesn't benefit you until you digest. Eating is just the beginning. You may actually fulfill your hunger a little bit, but it doesn't benefit you until it goes through your system and gets absorbed. And it's a marvelous thing what Ishvara does to the food. It's just incredible when you think about it. That is what absorption and digestion is. And this is exactly the same thing that should happen whenever we are studying the texts as well. So that's all I would say about Swami Dayanandaji's book. Very, very complete, very comprehensive, very structured, and detailed enough so that you can actually see each word and its meaning and then put them together. Next to Swami Maheshanandaji's book. So as I mentioned to you, this is actually a combination of two separate books, if you may. This is the way to look at it. And by the way, I am looking forward to taking this back with me because my book is completely torn and it is very old. But the advantage is that I have a habit which I would recommend to you. You don't have to do this, but this is what has worked for me very well. I have a habit to underline with pencil. I never ever use a pen for marking on the books. So get a 0.7 HB pencil, mechanical pencil, sharp but very nice, and underline the words that appeal to you. And sometimes you can even erase it if you want to. I get a good eraser. So I don't want to mark it completely, but it is really... And then the second thing is that when you revise it, that revision, immediately you go into the areas where you had actually seen the emphasis that appealed to you. And so it's a very nice thing. So I've done the whole book about 3 or 4 times, probably more than that, and I've underlined. So this one is not, so I may have to really start copying my underlining from the old book to this book. Anyway, there are 2 sections to the book. Let me see if I can find the table of contents. Yeah. So if you go to page K, not 1, 2, 3, but the alphabet K, Anukraminika, Anukramanika. So here, Wait a second, what is going on in here? Something is not right. Oh my goodness. This is different than the other one. No, it's not. Sorry. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, no. It just, the page numbers were slightly different and so on, but it's okay, everything is fine. For a moment it threw me off. So it has two segments. First segment is from page number 1 to 129. Okay, 1 to 129. This is the first section. So this is similar to Swami Dayanandaji's book, where you go through mantra by mantra and go through the entire ShriRudram in a very brief commentary. It is similar but not the same. As I mentioned, I think before, all the words are not completely taken up. Only the key ones are taken up. And so it is not comprehensive in that sense. But he has really emphasized on the words that he wanted to focus on. And so each of the mantras is given a meaning, but not word for word. It is really more of his immediate commentary. And it could have been even done while he's not talking to anybody. I don't know how it was done. But this one is the first section, which goes up to it goes up to 124, sorry. One to 124. This is the first section. Okay, so you can turn your page to 124 for just a second. And so he has given the ending to that, and so this whole thing is there. So when we study it, and I'm going to go over some salient points of this, he's going to now bring out the Adhyatmika view in addition to the Adidaivika view, as I mentioned about Vamana, that example. And so this is where it will supplement Swami Dayanandaji's book, because the emphasis is more on Adhyatmika. So this is the first section. Then, in starting with after page 124, the page numbers are reset to 1 again. So can you see that? So in 124, it goes back to 1 again. And now the second section of the book begins, which is 638, up to page 638. Here, he has taken the first 8 mantras and exhaustively commented on them based on his public lectures in New Delhi in 1975. Okay? Those, if I can now bring you back into the table of contents for a minute. So we go back to Ka, again Ka. So you can see that the start of the second section begins with Prathama Mantra Ki Vyakhya, is page 1 to 30. Okay, so that is the Vyakhya, means an exposition. A detailed is called Vyakhya. And so that is given starting with page number 1 to 30 for the first mantra. And that exposition we will do in the first 2 morning classes, starting from tomorrow. This is not a morning class, so we would go back to our first section today and go into it in a minute, just a couple of minutes. But then, starting tomorrow, I'm going to devote the first 2 classes of the day, starting with the second section, which is Prathama Mantra in more detail. And that gives us an idea of somebody sitting here and talking. If Swamiji was here, what would he say to you? What are the key things that he would say? So it's really of a public lecture to people. And I feel, just visualizing his talk, it is to householders. He talks a lot about business people, shopkeepers, what they go through, and so on. Even though I feel that the subject matter that he broaches and touches on is very deep. So it's as though he's talking to sannyasis. But there's not a single word about sannyasi here. All the examples are all about householders. I found that to be very, very useful, honestly. And so I think we look forward to at least getting a glimpse of it in the next 5 or 6 days that are left. I don't know how much we'll be able to do, but I think you'll get a good glimpse of it. So that's the evening, that is the morning section of it. Okay? So with that, I have given you an introduction to it. If you have any questions about it, we can discuss this in the satsang tonight at 7:30. So let me preserve the no question answers in this session, but you are very welcome to ask questions about the structure, etc. in the satsang. Okay. So we ended the morning class today with the importance of ShriRudram. We went over that in some detail. Okay. Then I began to give you the structure of the 11 anuvakas. And while we were starting to look at that, in the time remaining, we said that we will look at the entire structure in 2 aspects of it, right? And the 2 aspects were prarthana and namaha. Namaha and prarthana in that section. And so this is where we ended. So I had suspended a quick review of the entire ShriRudram. Now let's begin the quick review of the entire one. So I should also say that in the evening classes, which is what this is, the 3rd class, the primary emphasis will be introductory, not in depth, because we have to cover a lot of material. The vidya, the shravanam, the new aspects of that will be secondary. In the morning is just the opposite. The morning classes will be mostly on the vidya, much less on the structure, because we don't have any structures to talk about. We just have some specific mantras. So in this class, I am already telling you that my emphasis will be almost like, this is like examining the mirror. We're not examining yourself, mostly. Once in a while we will look at it. Today also I was just revising the notes. There will be a couple of things that will be looking at yourself, but most of that will be looking at the mirror. The morning classes will be looking at yourself. This is how it will do it. Okay, so this is just looking at the mirror. So when you say what is the structure of ShriRudram, you're looking at the mirror, not at yourself. Here is the structure. The first anuvaka, as I had already mentioned, I won't spend much time on it, is a compendium of the entire ShriRudram, just like the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, with the emphasis on prarthana. On prarthana. So one can even say that the prarthana is really the main emphasis, the main subject matter of ShriRudram. Prarthana means a prayer. It's a prayer. It is supplemented by namaha, Because the question is, who are you praying to? Are you sure that the person you're praying to is capable of giving it to you? So that all comes under the Namaha. But the actual prayer, when you ask somebody, you can go to someone and say, it's almost like you can go to a doctor. Supposing you have a specialist, and so you find out this person is a specialist in this particular disease, and then you go in and say, I've heard a lot about you, and I am sent to you. I know it was very difficult to get an appointment with you. In our Palo Alto Medical Clinic, you don't get an appointment for 3 months. It's just incredible how the doctors have become so difficult to get to, and so on, the good ones. So anyway, you go into the doctor's office and you say, I found out that you are hard to get to, you must be very good, this, that. This is called Namaha. This is what Namaha is. Then the doctor says, okay, good. What brings you here? What's your problem? Then you say, can you please help me in this particular... This is prarthana. So this is exactly what ShriRudram is, really. We have to think about that way. So the first chapter is an amalgam of the prarthana. It has some namaha also. It's not, as I said, it's a compendium, but it is prarthana. Then, in Anuvaka number from 2 to 9, it is Namaha, Namaskara. Namaha or Namaskara, Namaste is the same thing. And as you know, the word Namaste means Namaha Te. I bow to you. This is a very beautiful greeting that we Hindus have, which is Namaste. I think it is so wonderful. And really the meaning of Namaste is, you just think about it, how it happens in our life. You're talking to somebody and so on, or somebody else comes in, that you say Namaste. When you say Namaste, of course, if you fold your hands like this, and then you say, my attention is now to you. So this is the real meaning of Namaha and Namaste. I am now focused on you. And then you can say, please come, whatever it is, but you cannot say Namaste, because you're not even looking at the person or anything like this. So anyway, so that is the Namaskara, Namaste, and that is the subject matter primarily. Whenever we say something like this, not exclusively. Even in the Bhagavad Gita, it's such a beautiful thing. You can take almost any chapter, and you will see jnanam, you will see bhakti, you will see karma, you will see karma yoga in one form or the other. But the main emphasis will be one or the other. So you have a combination of the entire thing as well as a specific thing. And the same thing is true for ShriRudram also. So even though when we say that number 2 to 9 will be Namaskara specific, that doesn't mean that prarthana is not there. It will be there, just like in the Bhagavad Gita ones also. Anyway, so that's what it is. Now, I would now detail the Namaskara into 3 main sections. So Namaskara means, as we talked about it this morning also, Namaskara means the recognition of my appreciation of the grandeur of Ishvara. And the Sanskrit word for grandeur is Mahima. Mahima means, as I think I'd already mentioned to you, that example of Einstein coming to talk. So a high schooler is unlikely, almost not possible for a high schooler to know the Mahima of Einstein. But if you are a great scientist yourself, you are a Nobel Prize winner, And if you give an introduction to Einstein, you understand the Mahima of Einstein. So really speaking, this Mahima, this grandeur of Ishvara is segmented into three portions. What are those? Number one is Sarveshwaratvam. Ishvara as Sarvasya Ishvaraha. This is what Ishvara means. I will go into that in more detail. And I'll explain to you what the differences are. So Sarveshwaratvam is the first Mahima. The second Mahima is Sarvatmakatvam. Sarvatmakatvam means the presence everywhere. There's nothing is outside of it. You know, that's Swami Dayananda used to say that. He has encapsulated the teachings of Vedanta in some very beautiful sayings that we had not heard before. So it's not as though it's a new Vidya, but his way of interpreting. You know this very well. Swamiji would be asked that, do you have one God or many gods? This was the question. This is the question. And the answer is not, you cannot say, okay, just give me the answer to my question. Is there one God or are there many gods? It is very much like, you go to buy a car, and these clever salespeople in the car. These days that's not true because there's no cars to buy, and there's people so on. But the old days were that cars were hard to sell. They were all sitting in the outside, and so you were walking around. So the very sharp sales rep will say, "Which color do you like?" Because they've already said that I'm going to Ford, so I've already localized I'm going to get a Ford, and so there's some sedans and so on and so forth. So they don't say, do you want to buy or not? They'll say, what color do you want? So the answer to that is, why are we even talking about a color? I don't even think about a color. That's the right answer. But unfortunately, most people say, oh, I like white. Oh, we have the best white cars in the whole world. Just let me show you the white car. You're already gone, half of it. So when people were asked Swamiji, is there one God or many gods? So he used to say, just give me the answer, one or the other. Either if you say we have one God, or you have say many gods. There's no third answer. The Swamiji would say, and he has said it, and this is the important thing, we don't have one God or many gods, we only have God. So, this is a big difference. This is a huge thing. So one God means, I am here, and there is one God sitting somewhere else. Or there are multiple gods sitting at various places. So the questioner would say, okay, you have one God sitting somewhere? Or do you have multiple gods sitting somewhere? Just give me the answer. This is like saying, what color do you want? There's no question of one God. The whole thing is nothing but God. This is what we have to understand. So this is the Sarvatmakatvam. Because, as you know very well, and you should know this very well, Vedanta is the only spiritual discipline in the whole cosmos that we are aware of that views Ishvara both as Nimitta Karanam and Upadana Karanam. This is an amazing thing. Either people don't agree with that, or they muddle it up in some way or the other. They'll say, well, for example, one example of muddling it up is if you ask a Christian believer, that where did God get the material from? This was the typical question Swamiji would ask. Where did you get the material from if you are not the material? So the answer that the Christian would give, and they do, I'm telling you, this is we have gone through this many times. They'll say, don't ask me that question, because he's so powerful he will figure it out. This is an example of muddling. You don't give a clear answer one way or the other. So Vedanta is the only one that accounts for and specifically addresses both the material cause as well as the intelligent cause. So when you say the sarvatmakatvam, okay, this is the material cause. This is the upadana karanam. There's a lot to be said about this. I'm running through so much material on this. Upadana karanam. So that is the second segment of the Mahima. First one was Sarveshwaratvam. Second one is Sarvatmakatvam. The third is Sarva Antaryamitvam. Sarva Antaryamitvam. So Antaryami means this is where the intelligence cause is more, they're all intertwined anyway, but specifically the nimitta karanam is expositioned in the antaryamitvam. Antaryamitvam means, so just look at this for a minute. Examine your own self, your own personality. You have a life, you're given a certain situation in life, and you negotiate your way through depending on your wisdom, your background, all kinds of things. You make decisions, and you do it regardless of anyone else. Not regardless, but primarily by yourself. You are responsible for who you are, no one else. Not your parents anymore, not your spouse, not children. You have to do that. So, if a question were to be asked, which it is, this question is asked in the Brahma Sutra. The Brahma Sutra is just a remarkable thing, because there is a ascertainment of, if there are some doubts out of them, which one is the right answer. And it's done in a very binary way. Swami Dayananda used to say that this is a remarkable thing in the entire structure of thinking. How Vedanta resolves complicated matters is by making it into binary, which is exactly done. If you look at Siddhanta Purva Paksha, it is really bringing the complicated, obtuse matter into something very simple. So in Brahma Sutra, this specializes. Brahma Sutra is like a Supreme Court. So in the Supreme Court, you have two sides. Should we abolish abortion, or should we keep the abortion? These are the two sides. So they have to make a judgment. Of course, they are human, so they can make the wrong judgment. That doesn't happen with Ishvara, thankfulness. So there is a judgment that you have to make between these two. So here, supposing somebody asks you, you're leading your life in a particular way. Are you responsible for it? Or is it Ishvara that is responsible for it? We know what the answer we will all give. I am responsible for it. I am the one that is raising my hand. Ishvara is not raising the hand. I am the one who slaps me. I'm responsible for it. And so, if you look at the Antaryami section in Brahma Sutra, and it has so much commentary, so wonderful section. We covered that recently in one of the classes that we just finished. Do you know what this answer is? Ishvara is responsible, not you. This is a complete shock. Absolute shock. How can that be? Fine, you can have a shock. We didn't say that you should be shockless. But the final answer is, Ishvara is the one that raised this hand. Ishvara is the one that slapped. How is that possible? This is the subject of the understanding. And so that understanding, remember we began the whole class by saying that life is a joke. And not understanding it, meaning that I am responsible for my life, I am doing it, when in fact you are a bit player at best, a very secondary player. There's a lot of different factors, and the main player is Ishvara. So how that does it is through the Antaryami. So the thoughts that you have, your directions, your conclusions, your thinking, all of that is already given to you. And it's very likely, it's almost like Ishvara is saying, I know what he's going to do next. Because you're likely to do that thing next. And so, this is the Antaryamitvam, which comes from Nimitta Karanam. So now, our Namaskara, so in summarizing, the Namaskara that you will see primarily in verses, in Anuvakas number 2 through 9, with segment into, and we will go through this to see which one is Sarveshwaratvam, which one is Sarvatmakatvam, which was Sarvam Antaryamitvam. We will do that to a certain degree. This is the segment on Mahima of the Ishvara. Okay? So now we have covered up to 9. Then, the Anuvaka number 10 goes back to the summary of the Prarthana. Maheshwara Prarthana. So remember, we began with it. So this is where the main subject matter is. Subject matter is Prarthana. Why? Because we saw this. There is a way of ascertaining what the subject matter is. That if it is began and ended and repeated and emphasized and praised and the results given, that must be the main topic. So the main topic of ShriRudram is Prarthana. And what kind of Prarthana? This is a very interesting thing. What kind of Prarthana? The main Prarthana is Prayaschita Prarthana. I remember the words of Swami Dayanandji on this so well. He would emphasize this. So the ShriRudram is a Prayaschita Karma. So what do we mean by Prayaschita Karma? It means remedial action. Remedial action means it has already happened, but it can be modified. Exactly like if you eat something which is doesn't suit you. Like for example, suppose, and this has happened to me, I'm giving you the real example. When I was born, I had a very severe allergy, which is there even today, to tur dal. From the very beginning, I was extremely allergic. You cannot believe what I would go through. Highly asthmatic. My skin, my mother could not even pinch me. My skin would get... it got to a point where I would shut the door and not subject my family to the suffering that I was going through. It was that bad. So this is the tur dal. And finally we figured out, okay, I have to stay away from it. But once in a while, not knowing that there is tur in there, because in sambar there is tur, and so it looks like even today, for example, we were sitting there with the Ashok in the dining hall, and there is this yellow dal. So my wife is sitting there, and she says, it may have tur. So I says, no, I think I can taste it. She says, no, let me go double check. So she found out that there's no tur, so I was okay. But supposing I have tur, it's likely that I can do some remedial action. And so you can take EpiPen, or you can take all these. When I was young, there was no EpiPen. There was no remedial action really at that time. But now my younger son is very allergic to a lot of things. He cannot take any dal. I am only allergic to tur, he is allergic to all dals. He has to keep a EpiPen all the time. This happened to him recently. Just there was lentil was put into something that was not supposed to be there. So he had to rush to Walgreens and get some medicines and so on. Those actions to remedy what has already happened is what is called prayaschitta karma. So the main prarthana of ShriRudram is prayaschitta prarthana, prayaschitta karma. I am sorry. See, the other thing is, this is a very beautiful thing to just look at it. To look at the adhyatmika way of prayaschitta karma. Saying I am sorry sincerely is a very powerful thing. In fact, it is a very simple thing, but very powerful. The problem is we don't want to do it because of our ego. We don't want to admit that we were wrong. And we continue to believe that we were not wrong. And even if we know it, we say, I'm not going to be sorry to that person. This is the issue. This is what happens. This, by the way, is a very, in fact, I think it may be time to just focus it. I had a certain sequence of doing things, but I'm breaking it. I bring things in as thoughts occur and so on. So forgive me if I'm just going back and forth. This prayaschitta karma is, I think, the main subject of ShriRudram. Very important to know this. Understanding this really can be so helpful in our lives. And you will see this, in fact, when we start the very first class tomorrow morning on the first very mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya, Namaste Rudramanyava Utota Ishabe Namaha, Namaste Astu Dhanvane Bahubhyam Utate Namaha, Yata Ishu Shivatama Shivam Babhuvate Dhanu. The exposition of the prayaschitta karma will begin. So we will do this in great detail. But I am tempted to give you an example right now of the nature of the prayaschitta karma, which is the basis of ShriRudram. Okay? So the prayaschitta karma is the following. And I think this example was given by Swami Maheshananji. Yes, I think it was given by him. In one of it was going to occur in the morning class, but I'm borrowing it in the evening class just to make the point here. Here's the situation. There's a husband and wife, and they have a son who's gone into wrong company. In his teenage years, he keeps the company of people who are drinking, who are taking drugs, and he's got into bad habits, and he's deteriorating. Deteriorating in the sense that he is, the parents were aware of the fact that this person's friends are not the best. But they tried to dissuade him from it and so on. And he would many times say, okay, I won't see that person again. But the evidence was contrary to it. And so they would actually, as the person was growing up, they would punish him in some way or the other. You know, you can do this, then you're not going to be able to go with us, etc. But the bad behavior continued. For whatever reason, the person was unable to extricate himself from the bad company. And then things came to a head where there was shouting and yelling and you know, he might have done something really bad, he'd taken some drugs or something, whatever it is, and the kid was crying, and the parents were also ready to throw him out and say, you are being a blot in our life, and so on and so forth. Something happened to the child where, as previously he would say, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, I'm sorry, but inside he would say, oh, I think I can fool them again, I can keep doing it. This time, he was very sincere. He broke down and said, Mom and Dad, I have realized I'm going in the wrong direction. I don't want to do that anymore. Okay? And I know I promised you many times before, but this is real. I'm very sincere. And please help me, because I do have bad influences going on and I have gotten into some bad habits. Help me to isolate myself and to make sure that I don't really fall into it. I beg you. He fell at their feet. When that happens, what are the parents going to do? Just think of it. If you and I are parents, are they not even hurt more than the child? Of course they are. The child is suffering and the parents are suffering more than that. Are they not really going to now help him? Are they not going to believe him? Because he has now broken down and seems to be very sincere? Of course he is. Of course he is. And so there might be some further difficulties. There might have to be some treatment where, you know, if he's drinking, for example, to anti-alcoholic league or something like this. But the entire set of things that have to be done will be for his good. And so this is the situation, and we see this. You go to a doctor, and you find out that there is some disease that I have, and what this would mean. And you know, for example, in oncology, you will say, I am very sorry to tell you that you have an advanced state of cancer, and it has already spread, and what we have to do now is chemotherapy and radiation and this, that, or the other. And so now, what are you going to do? Are you going to beat up the doctor? Our youngest son was born with some problems, and we had to go through many surgeries for him. And he was born with a cleft lip and palate. And when we started to, he's gone through like, I think about a dozen different major surgeries in his life. And when he was like 6 or 7, he didn't know what was happening to him. But when he became 10 or 11, he would say, this doctor is my enemy, don't take me there. So we'll say, no, he's not your enemy. Yes, he is, I'm telling you, don't get me to the... So it was such a difficult situation. But then he grew up, and I think the last surgery was when he was like 17, 18, and he's now a good, wonderful person and so on. So the doctor would say, I have to give you some pain. I'm sorry. I cannot just ignore that. Swami Maheshanji gave a very beautiful example. He says, suppose you find that a big crack develops in the wall, which was never there before. And so you say, oh my God, what is this crack doing here? How did this happen? So you call an engineer, and the engineer looks at it and says, are you ready for the news? He said, yes. What? He says, this is a very serious problem in your house. Your foundation is weak, and this pressure is coming up. This is not a quick fix. This is going to take several $1,000s. Okay? And so you can deny it and say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I think we can just paint over it. And what do you know about it? I don't have the money anyway, so forget about it. You do that, you're going to have further problems. And so the bad news is for your own good. That you're happy that you got this engineer to come in who knows what it's all about, and you better fix it now, because if you don't, it's going to get a lot worse. The whole house may fall down. So this is the Prayaschitta karma. So we will see this in much more detail in the next class. Ishvara has two personalities. And this is a very important thing, because this looks to the nature of Ishvara as abhinna nimitta upadana karanam. Because it is not as though the Ishvara is only doing good. See, this is the issue with many of the religions, many of the religious thoughts, spiritual thoughts, that don't recognize God as having both personalities. So they recognize that the God is all daya, all kindness and so on. And some other person, some devil or somebody else is kind of putting spokes in the wheel and spoiling things and so on. But you kindly go to the good one rather than to the bad one, as though there is a bifurcation of two people who are competing with each other. This is a very big thing, because if somebody were to ask you, explain to us, how do you reconcile this disparity of behavior? Because we see the disparity of the behavior. We see people who are, innocent kids that were killed by this shooter. What have they done? How could Ishvara allow this to happen? So these are legitimate questions in our minds. So how can you have this? Is Ishvara a kind person, or is he a cruel person? And sometimes it looks like he's a cruel person. So this is a very important question that comes up in it. And ShriRudram resolves it very well. Very well. So this is the Prayaschitta karma in the form of saying that the same person who gives you the bad news, the same person who gives you 12 different surgeries, is the same person who will now help you to resolve. They're not two separate people, they're the same person. And if you say that this doctor gave me the bad advice, and you can always do this, you can always go to somebody else and say, can I do it without the chemotherapy? And so you say, yeah, I think you can try doing this, Ayurveda. You can do this, that, or the other. And so you say, see, I just have to find the right person who gives me the answers that I want. You can always do that. Don't do it. Because the same person that gives you the bad news is also the same person who will resolve the effects of the bad news. This is the nature of Ishvara, which is unfolded in this very beautiful book called the ShriRudram. And so this is what is called, when we do the evening prayers, which will happen soon. So he says, this is the Ghora Rupa and Aghora Rupa. So the Ghora Rupa is frightening. Frightening. So exactly that's what happened in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna was showing the Vishwarupa to Arjuna, and Arjuna was frightened. It was just amazing. And so then Krishna says, okay, now let me give you the Aghora Rupa. Aghora Rupa. You know, it's interesting. Sometimes what is hidden from us is actually a kindness by Ishvara. You look at this, just look at that. Supposing you take your hand out, the back of your hand, or anywhere, any part of the body, and you start examining it in detail with some microscopes. You know what will happen? You will want to cut your hand off. There are such frightening things right behind the surface, roaring around, that you will be just scared and say, what is this? But it is hidden from you. It is necessary for the the skin to function that way. In fact, there are infinite number of things inside of your own body. There are microbes, there's viruses, there's cancer cells, there's all kinds of things, but they are really hidden away from you. You don't have to worry about that. So in that sense, it is full of love that Ishvara gives. But if a problem occurs, then you have to submit to the same person. You cannot go to say, I want to go to a different God who tells me something else altogether. This is the nature of ShriRudram. And so both the Ghora Rupa and Aghora Rupa is talked about, tackled head on. You don't put it underneath and saying, okay, now you're all love and so on. No, there are problems that you have to face. And face it with what? Prayaschitta karma. So the whole ShriRudram is the nature of Prayaschitta karma. And as Swami Dayananda used to say that, there is no Prayaschitta karma which is more effective, more comprehensive than ShriRudram. So we will continue with that, and I'll close the class now, and we can discuss it over the evening session, or you can wait for some more expositions tomorrow morning, as we are not done yet. This is just the beginning. So with that, I close the class. Om Asato ma satgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.